Hello everyone. Welcome to this episode of the Test Drive. Today we're driving this brand new Volvo XC60 T8 in the fully loaded trim, and let's pull back the curtain on it. As usual, when we talk about a car, we start with the engine. First, let me say one thing. The opening angle of the XC60's hood is honestly very large. That is extremely convenient for mechanics when doing maintenance. But for owners, in daily use, if you just want to add some windshield washer fluid, friends who are shorter might find it a little inconvenient. Anyway, I'm 183 centimeters tall, and even I have to rise up on my tiptoes a little to reach this corner. Still, that's not a major issue. What comes into view here as a T8 model is its plug-in hybrid powertrain. Under the hood, it has a 2.0T twin-charged engine, producing 310 horsepower and 400 newton-meters of torque, with one traditional turbo and one electric turbo. And it is paired with a P1 plus P4 hybrid system. Put simply, in plain language, that means there is a 48-volt motor at the front of the car, and at the rear axle, there is an independent battery and motor setup that can drive this Volvo XC60 entirely in pure electric form. That also means you can drive it in a pure rear-wheel drive mode in daily driving. Of course, another consequence of this is that the car does not have a traditional drive shaft running from front to rear. It relies on electronic control to manage the entire all-wheel drive system. This 2.0T engine is paired with an ASIN 8AT transmission, and its overall performance is still quite good. I personally don't think there are any issues with it. I'm also very familiar with this system because I've driven an earlier version of this powertrain in my own S60 Polestar. Its motor makes 145 horsepower and 309 newton-meters, so for daily driving this car, it is completely sufficient. It comes with a 19 kilowatt-hour battery, and although it only supports slow charging, in my own testing in a Beijing winter, with the seat heating on, the heated steering wheel on, and the heater running, doing 50 kilometers was absolutely no problem. For consumers who have charging conditions, daily commuting is completely enough. A 50-kilometer winter round trip is totally fine. In summer, the range will definitely be a bit higher, because if I remember correctly, its CLTC range is 64 kilometers. Of course, when it comes to this powertrain, what we should talk about more is its combined output of 455 horsepower. Why? Because the theory and basis of this P1 plus P4 plug-in hybrid structure means that its battery ultimately can never ever truly be completely depleted. That means as long as there is some charge, whether it's low on charge or fully charged, the whole time I'm driving it, I never really feel any obvious difference in the power delivery. The whole car feels extremely brisk. Whether the engine is running or not, the transition in power is very smooth. Although this is the new Volvo XC60, in reality, ever since the launch of the SPA platform, this generation of XC60, from its release and launch back in 2018 until now, has only undergone relatively minor changes. The main reason, in my view, is that this generation of XC60 is already a fairly complete product, so Volvo has simply been making it better in small ways. Of course, in the process of improving it, there are also some things that were lost, and I really miss them. My longtime viewers know that I'm a very deep Volvo owner. I bought the fully loaded S90 before, I bought a US spec S60 T5, and I also bought a genuine T8 Polestar S60 from Volvo in the US. So what is the thing I really miss? It's the lock sound. Now all you can hear is that very mechanical-sounding Volvo door lock sound when it locks. But that old little beep 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 unlocking and locking prompt sound is gone, and that sound was really premium and really pleasant. If Volvo happens to see this video, could you please bring it back? The hardware is already there, it's just a software thing. Please add it back and give us the option. That sound really felt very premium. After this facelift compared with the old model, the new Volvo XC60 has mainly just updated some family-style design elements and made a few small changes in the details. As usual, let's start from the front. The Thor's Hammer daytime running lights are still retained, so the recognizability remains extremely high. And it also has fully adaptive LED headlights with steering function and adaptive high and low beams, and the overall lighting effect is still quite good. In my view, Volvo headlights have always been a configuration that is more than good enough. The grille has changed quite a bit compared with the old model. First of all, the badge is now mirrored, and before everyone used to joke that Volvo was a brand that carried safety all the way into the logo itself, that even the badge wore a seatbelt. Now, on the new Volvo models, we can see that the entire grille adopts an interwoven mesh design. The whole grille looks like it's wearing a seatbelt. Compared with the old vertically recessed grille, I think it looks more distinctive, and the sense of luxury has also increased, because too many brands use vertical grilles now. Looking at the whole front end, I feel like Volvo has always done things in a very restrained and proper way, and the recognizability is honestly very high. Even though people who don't know the models well may not be able to tell at a glance whether it's a 60 or a 90, but recognizing that it's a Volvo is absolutely no problem. And as a fairly traditional luxury brand, I think the exterior does not have any unnecessary over-design at all, and it fits Volvo's core design philosophy very well. Minimalistic, but not simple. It has everything it should have, and the design heritage is there too. Including the entire front fascia, you can see that it uses a lot of hard-edged creases to layer the front end. Whether it looks ugly or not is subjective, but in my eyes, there is nothing wrong with Volvo's exterior design, especially at a time when competitors and rival brands are making their designs more and more abstract. The Volvo XC60's exterior can actually feel refreshing, because this kind of restrained design appeals to most people, especially its target customers. Moving to the side of the body, the first thing to talk about is this 20-inch wheel on the Volvo XC60 T8. This wheel design is still very attractive. It has a pedal-style design, and it uses a combination of gloss black and brushed silver surfaces. The overall visual effect looks very good. It is also fitted with Volvo-certified Pirelli P0 tires with sound-deadening foam, and both front and rear are 255 width. The suspension system is worth talking about. On the top trim, this 4C air suspension comes standard. It has 3 adjustable stages and will make adjustments according to the drive mode and body posture. We'll talk more about this suspension later when we're driving. I think its tuning is quite unusual, especially compared with Volvo's traditional coil spring standard suspension. The difference in character is actually very noticeable. Since it comes standard on the top trim, I think it's a very good choice. For consumers who have high expectations for ride quality, choosing the top trim, in my view, is not a mistake. Continuing with the side of the body, the braking system is a very traditional Volvo single-piston setup. Overall, braking performance is good, and braking force really comes on properly. We'll talk more about that later when driving. There is also a charging port on the fender. This car only supports slow charging, as we mentioned earlier when talking about the engine bay. Along the side of the body, there are still no flashy design elements at all. There is a silver bright trim strip running above the whole side skirt, which enhances the visual effect rather than dragging it down. I think that's very good. It makes the whole side look cleaner and more capable, especially paired with this crystal white paint. I personally find white very hard to resist. My previous S90 was also in the same color. It really is beautiful and looks very elegant. My favorite angle of the XC60 is its rear 3/4 angle. Everyone says the rear 3/4 angle is the most beautiful angle for a wagon, and I personally think the XC60's rear 3/4 angle is also very beautiful. This kind of hard-edged design looks especially pleasing, and it blends well with the entire taillight design. You can see the taillights, that battle axe style shape, integrated with the rear fenders, all cut in with those sharp lines. From this angle, the car looks especially squat, especially solid, and especially compact. Compared with some competitors, I think this design is quite distinctive. You can also see that under the SPA architecture, whether it's the 60 series or the 90 series, Volvo models all use this kind of hard-edged design. They don't use soft lines to outline the whole rear. That is why when you look at the Volvo 60 series, you never feel that it is bloated. Of course, another reason is that this car was not lengthened. But not being lengthened has both pros and cons. The exterior proportions look better, but the interior space naturally becomes a little tighter. We'll talk about that when we get inside. The entire taillight assembly is full LED, nothing much to say there. The rear, like the front, is also very clean and capable. You have the Volvo badge, the model badge, the T8 identity badge, and on the rear bumper on the new XC60, you can no longer see the exhaust outlets because Volvo is moving toward electrification in the future, so all the exhaust outlets have been hidden. As for cargo space, I think the XC60 does quite well. First of all, at this level, a power tailgate is definitely standard, and the kick-to-open function is also included. Of course, you can also open the tailgate using the key fob. Let me add one more thing. The rear bright trim, combined with that small roof spoiler on top, makes the visual center of gravity of the rear focus more toward the middle, making the rear look more compact and more capable. The opening height of the cargo area is something I want to mention first. Honestly, the height is very good. I'm 183 centimeters tall, and when I stand under the tailgate, my head doesn't hit it at all. Taller people won't hit the tailgate. And for shorter people, precisely because of the presence of this 4C air suspension, here you can see there are two reserved buttons, and you can manually lower the air suspension further. The cargo floor height then comes down to about even with my knee. For some women with smaller builds, whether taking things out or loading and unloading items, that becomes extremely convenient. As for the cargo space itself, the opening is okay, the width is okay, and the depth, because this isn't an extra-long family-oriented model, will be just a tiny bit behind some competitors, but overall the space is completely fine for family use. I know many people around me who drive XC60s with families of 3 or 4, and there's no problem fitting all their luggage. The rear seats also fold in a 40-60 split, and the center has a pass-through for carrying longer items like skis, which is very convenient. That also fits the user profile of a Nordic brand, right? But the cargo area is not without shortcomings. As a family car and as an SUV, it actually doesn't have a 12-volt power outlet in the back. I think maybe Volvo could consider adding one in the future. Plugging in a small fridge or something when you go out would be very convenient. Under the cargo floor, when you open the cover, it has a two-stage arrangement. The first stage is a small storage compartment. Opening the second stage reveals things like the inflation equipment. There is also a fire extinguisher, and you can see Volvo's original air pump, tire repair fluid, and the battery there too. So overall, the cargo area is fairly regular in shape, and this extra little bit of storage space can be used for random tools, towels, and various odds and ends. There are hooks where they should be, and in this XC60 they are standard as well. On the left side, there is also an extra hollowed-out storage section. Although there is no net pocket, there is a small lip there, so even if you place some items there, they won't spill out as easily. So yes, XC60 still gives you what should be there. What do you all think of the new Volvo XC60's exterior? Feel free to give it a score in the comments and bullet chat. Open the door and step inside, and what greets you is Volvo's long-standing, extremely minimalist, very warm, homey-style Nordic interior. But I honestly suggest that if you buy a Volvo, don't choose a black interior, because compared with Volvo's other very striking interior colors, like amber, beige, off-white, or brown, black really does look a bit plain, and many of the small design details are not as obvious. Do you understand what I mean? I don't want to compare brands harshly, but compared with cars in the same class, this standard Bowers & Wilkins audio system on the top trim is indeed excellent. And as a previous Volvo S90 and S60 owner, both of my cars had the Bowers & Wilkins audio system, so I can say without problem that this audio system is truly above its class. There's no need to exaggerate it too much, but relative to this price point, it absolutely is an above-class presence. The listening experience is very good. Whether surround is on or off, the overall presentation is extremely balanced. The seats in the top trim XC60 are also worth discussing. First of all, the full Nappa leather material speaks for itself. The seats are ergonomic, and the range of adjustment is honestly very large. The thigh support can extend forward, the seat adjustment range is good, the side bolsters can be adjusted, and there is four-way lumbar support. The supportiveness of this top trim seat is honestly very good, and long-distance driving is no problem. I'm also very familiar with this seat, so I have plenty of confidence and authority to speak on it. Even on the luxury trim, it also comes with seat massage, and ventilation and heating are standard. The overall performance is very, very good. I think this seat deserves praise. It's just that black really does look too plain. Now that we're sitting inside, let's talk about the cabin's sound insulation and quietness. Compared with the old XC90, well, rather compared with the previous generation of this setup, the new XC60 absolutely has a very obvious improvement. And I especially want to praise one thing. Volvo's new steering wheel design has finally been changed to this hollowed-out section. Compared with the previous closed-off section here, it really looks much better. The sense of sportiness has become more obvious. It's just that on the newer Volvo models, paddle shifters no longer exist. Back to the cabin, the most obvious difference from the old model is still the central infotainment screen. We also talked about this in the previous S90 episode. With the version updates, at least in the latest system, I haven't felt any bugs while using it. Whether it's response speed or rapidly switching between different screens to see whether it lags or crashes, there really aren't any issues. I think it's quite good. As for the screen setup itself, whether it looks good is subjective. But there is one detail that I gradually noticed over the past few days of driving. Volvo has simplified everything in the infotainment system. The most commonly used functions are placed right in front of you, and when you enter settings, the layered menus may actually be more than before, but Volvo places commonly used things on the surface. For example, one day I noticed that in the control center, functions you may never use, like whether the car lights up when locking or the folding mirror settings, are hidden deeper in the menus. Because for many Volvo buyers, they don't like overly complicated things. Functions you don't need, or functions you may never use from the day you buy the car until the day you sell the car, are hidden away, while more commonly used functions are placed right in front of you, making the overall UI simpler. I think that's actually quite good. As for the climate control, like I said, the overall design is still okay. On the T8 model, there is one additional feature. It can use engine heat for heating. That means even after the car is turned off, in winter, if you don't want to start the car, you can still use this function to keep blowing warm air from the engine's residual heat into the cabin. Its performance is quite good. As a top trim model, this car also comes with heated steering wheel, heated seats, and ventilated seats. Another thing worth mentioning in the interior is, first of all, the dashboard is full leather, and the seats are all Nappa leather as well. At the same time, the XC60 now has laminated, double-glazed, soundproof glass both front and rear, which is why its sound insulation is indeed noticeably better than before. This top trim driftwood panel trim also looks very comfortable to the eye, and the grain pattern is particularly nice. It is not coated in a glossy finish either. You can actually feel the texture of the bare wood. And on the passenger side air vent area, there is also a very detailed little Swedish flag badge on the trim strip. Volvo has always emphasized environmental friendliness, so the interior materials are all very family-friendly, baby-friendly grade. That is very good, and I think people who buy Volvo do care about this issue to a certain extent. And as a longtime Volvo owner, without exaggerating or criticizing, I have to say that new cars really don't smell, and even after being baked in the sun, they still don't smell. That is especially obvious now that I work in this field and drive new cars every day. In this regard, Volvo really deserves praise. Its performance is extremely, extremely good. Looking further down, the traditional physical knob for volume adjustment and some of these physical controls have been retained, which is consistent with the previous models. The crystal shifter lights up at night, and when you touch it, that icy cool feeling in your hand is really nice. I've personally always liked Volvo's electronic crystal shifter. Compared with the plastic one in lower trims, whether in appearance, texture, or feel, it is much, much better. Anyway, I personally like it a lot. Here, there is a wireless charging pad, a 12-volt outlet, and a folding cover with a really good feel to it. The sliding action honestly feels very nice, and once closed, the center console has a very cohesive look that feels very comfortable. There are 2 cup holders here and an extra small storage slot where you can put small items, toss the key, and so on. Anyway, one nice thing about Volvo's design is that whatever you're carrying on you, you can basically find a place to put it. That's nice. The center armrest box is not big and not very deep, but it's okay for putting small items, registration documents, cards, a phone, or other frequently used things. And inside here, it also gives you two Type-C charging ports. In terms of storage space, the door pull handle section is sealed off, but the lower storage compartment has no problem at all, and it even has a divided design. You can easily fit a standard bottle, like a large water bottle, in the front section, and the rear storage area is also very good. The glove box on the passenger side is flock-lined, reasonably square, and good for storing miscellaneous items. Overall, I think Volvo has always done storage space quite well. Whether on the 60 series or the 90 series, I've always been quite satisfied. It's just that because this car has a black interior, it still looks a little too plain, especially around the door panels. Of course, that is not the car's problem, it is purely because of this interior color choice. Choose white, choose brown, choose amber. Please remember that, remember that, remember that. As a T8 plug-in hybrid model, the driving modes are definitely something we need to talk about. Hybrid and sport modes are self-explanatory, so let's skip those for now. Pure electric mode means it will keep driving this XC60 using the rear axle motor. Creep mode is a new function added to the latest T8. To put it simply, if you turn it off, the car becomes a one-pedal vehicle with no idle creep. When you turn it on, it feels like a normal gasoline car when driving. This function is quite good, especially when paired with the strong regenerative braking of the current B gear. I think it works well. For people who like the driving feel of EVs, this gives them one more choice. As for off-road and all-wheel drive mode, off-road mode simply raises the 4C air suspension to its highest setting, and both the front and rear axles, the engine and the motor all keep supplying power continuously to distribute power better. The ESP also intervenes more actively, making it easier to get out of trouble and handle rough roads outdoors. That's exactly what off-road mode means. As for all-wheel drive mode, to put it simply, if you really like an aggressive driving feel but don't want the transmission to stay at high revs all the time, putting it in AWD mode does the trick. Once you enter AWD, you can see the instrument cluster immediately changes to a tachometer instead of the power output display. The engine and motor will continue to supply power to the car for a long time. The driving feel of the whole car in this mode is actually my personal favorite. Of course, once the engine comes in, fuel consumption increases. So for daily driving, the most comfortable mode is definitely hybrid. Now moving to the rear seat of the XC60. For consumers who care a lot about rear seat space, this can be considered a small shortcoming. The overall comfort of the seats, the reclining angle, and the lumbar support are all okay. You can see that at the front section of the seat cushion. At the same time, the XC60 now has laminated, double-glazed, soundproof glass both front and rear, which is why its sound insulation is indeed noticeably better than before. This top trim driftwood panel trim also looks very comfortable to the eye, and the grain pattern is particularly nice. It is not coated in a glossy finish either. You can actually feel the texture of the bare wood. And on the passenger side air vent area, there is also a very detailed little Swedish flag badge on the trim strip. Volvo has always emphasized environmental friendliness, so the interior materials are all very family-friendly, baby-friendly grade. That is very good, and I think people who buy Volvo do care about this issue to a certain extent. And as a longtime Volvo owner, without exaggerating or criticizing, I have to say that new cars really don't smell, and even after being baked in the sun, they still don't smell. That is especially obvious now that I work in this field and drive new cars every day. In this regard, Volvo really deserves praise. Its performance is extremely good. Looking further down, the traditional physical knob for volume adjustment and some of these physical controls have been retained, which is consistent with the previous models. The crystal shifter lights up at night, and when you touch it, that icy cool feeling in your hand is really nice. I've personally always liked Volvo's electronic crystal shifter. Compared with the plastic one in lower trims, whether in appearance, texture, or feel, it is much better. Anyway, I personally like it a lot. Here, there is a wireless charging pad, a 12-volt outlet, and a folding cover with a really good feel to it. The sliding action honestly feels very nice, and once closed, the center console has a very cohesive look that feels very comfortable. There are 2 cup holders here and an extra small storage slot where you can put small items, toss the key, and so on. Anyway, one nice thing about Volvo's design is that whatever you're carrying on you, you can basically find a place to put it. That's nice. The center armrest box is not big and not very deep, but it's okay for putting small items, registration documents, cards, a phone, or other frequently used things. And inside here, it also gives you 2 Type-C charging ports. In terms of storage space, the door pull handle section is sealed off, but the lower storage compartment has no problem at all, and it even has a divided design. You can easily fit a standard bottle, like a large water bottle, in the front section, and the rear storage area is also very good. The glove box on the passenger side is flock-lined, reasonably square, and good for storing miscellaneous items. Overall, I think Volvo has always done storage space quite well. Whether on the 60 series or the 90 series, I've always been quite satisfied. It's just that because this car has a black interior, it still looks a little too plain, especially around the door panels. Of course, that is not the car's problem, it is purely because of this interior color choice. Choose white, choose brown, choose amber. Please remember that, remember that, remember that. As a T8 plug-in hybrid model, the driving modes are definitely something we need to talk about. Hybrid and sport modes are self-explanatory, so let's skip those for now. Pure electric mode means it will keep driving this XC60 using the rear axle motor. Creep mode is a new function added to the latest T8. To put it simply, if you turn it off, the car becomes a one-pedal vehicle with no idle creep. When you turn it on, it feels like a normal gasoline car when driving. This function is quite good, especially when paired with the strong regenerative braking of the current B gear. I think it works well. For people who like the driving feel of EVs, this gives them one more choice. As for off-road and all-wheel drive mode, off-road mode simply raises the 4C air suspension to its highest setting, and both the front and rear axles, the engine and the motor, all keep supplying power continuously to distribute power better. The ESP also intervenes more actively, making it easier to get out of trouble and handle rough roads outdoors. That's exactly what off-road mode means. As for all-wheel drive mode, to put it simply, if you really like an aggressive driving feel but don't want the transmission to stay at high revs all the time, putting it in AWD mode does the trick. Once you enter AWD, you can see the instrument cluster immediately changes to a tachometer instead of the power output display. The engine and motor will continue to supply power to the car for a long time. The driving feel of the whole car in this mode is actually my personal favorite. Of course, once the engine comes in, fuel consumption increases, so for daily driving, the most comfortable mode is definitely hybrid. Now moving to the rear seat of the XC60. For consumers who care a lot about rear seat space, this can be considered a small shortcoming. The overall comfort of the seats, the reclining angle, and the lumbar support are all okay. You can see that at the front section of the seat cushion, there is some upward contouring compared to the position under your hips, so overall, the leg support is still okay. Sitting inside, with the front passenger seat adjusted to a comfortable position for my 183 centimeters, there is just about 1 fist of legroom left in the back. Headroom has nothing to do with whether the car is lengthened or not, and it is still very good. Compared with competitors like the X3 and GLC next door, this space is definitely smaller, but I think the overall seating experience is still fine. Sitting in the back, I personally haven't felt any major problems, even on longer trips. Of course, you can't cross your legs back here. For a family's only car, I can understand why some people would feel that a larger rear seat would definitely be better. In terms of equipment, it has the optional Bowers & Wilkins speakers and rear seat heating, but there is no independent rear climate temperature zone adjustment. There are vents on the B-pillars, and I actually think this design is quite good. The feel of the little roller there is especially nice. If you get the chance, you really should go find a car and play with that little roller. The texture is a bit sticky, and it's very fun. Other than that, there are 2 Type-C charging ports in the rear, and there are no other special features. The center armrest has 2 standard cup holders with rubber tabs around them, so basically any size cup placed here is no problem. The depth is okay too. The armrest itself is very wide, so you won't fight for space with the passengers on either side, but I do think its length is just a tiny bit short. Your arm can feel a little unsupported. If it were just a bit longer, it would be perfect. As for the seat itself, I admit that compared with some domestic family-oriented GLCs and X3s, this rear seat is neither the softest and plushest nor the longest and thickest, but its support is honestly very good, especially the headrest design and the side support. You can see that the support close to the body, especially around the lower back, is quite good for this class. Anyway, after long-distance riding, I haven't felt any problems. I think with Volvo's seats, you can't just blindly focus on whether they are soft or plush. More importantly, you have to look at whether they conform better to the human body. Subjectively, I think the rear seat is perfectly fine. Of course, if the seat were a little softer, that would definitely be better. As for space, I won't hide it from everyone. Compared with family-oriented models, it is indeed just a little smaller, but it is not cramped. Adults sitting here won't have any real issue. Personally, after long-distance riding, I think it's okay. But there is one point many people may not have noticed. I think Volvo's door opening angle is slightly too small, especially in the rear. When I lower my leg here, you can see that if I'm not careful, I can very easily kick the door panel. If the door opening angle could be a bit wider, I think it would be perfect. It just so happens that today in Beijing, it's snowing, and you can see outside it's especially dirty, right? It's all snow, all mud. But open the door and see this. Volvo's XC60 uses a semi-wrapped door design, which means when passengers get in and out, their pant legs won't get rubbed dirty no matter how dirty it is outside. That is especially good. Both the front and rear are like this. On this point alone, I absolutely have to give the Volvo XC60 praise. In this class, as far as I remember, apart from the Range Rover Velar, this is basically something unique to Volvo in terms of these kinds of details. As a Nordic brand from a country where it often snows, Volvo's designers deserve praise. This really is a very thoughtful detail. Getting your pant legs rubbed dirty is honestly very annoying. Okay then, enough talk. Please fasten your seatbelts, like, comment, subscribe, and follow. And let's take this Volvo XC60 T8 out on the road to talk about how it feels to drive. Okay then, no more nonsense. Let's take this Volvo XC60 T8 plug-in hybrid out on the road and talk about how it feels to drive. Right now, I've put all the driving modes of this car in their default state, except that I adjusted the steering assist to firm, because I think if the steering damping has a little more weight, the steering feel is better. That really comes down to personal preference, because if you set it to light, I feel the steering effort is a little too low. But in the city, it really is extremely easy to drive that way, so this is purely a matter of personal preference. The first impression when driving this XC60 T8 is that everything feels so soft and gentle. Whether it's the way the accelerator pedal feels in hybrid mode, or the suspension, or the steering, everything feels extremely soft. Everything is tuned in a very linear way. There is no mushy, stepping on cotton feeling, but it also doesn't feel like that imaginary cable in the middle is wound too tight. That particular sense is done extremely well. It's especially easy to drive. Everything about the tuning is very family-oriented and very friendly for all kinds of drivers. The brakes are like that too. In hybrid mode, regenerative braking intervenes first and only afterwards to the mechanical brakes. The transition between them is extremely good. In D mode, it's basically like a normal car that creeps forward. Pull the gear selector back into B and you get regenerative braking. If at this point we also turn off creep mode, then this car can be driven entirely like an all-electric vehicle. The integration between regenerative braking and the braking system is especially good, so when you step on the brake, the braking output is still very linear. But compared with the other dimensions of this car's driving character, I do feel the brake pedal return force and damping are just a little too strong. In other words, the brake pedal feels just a little firm, but the benefit of that is that the brakes never feel soft or vague. The feedback of the braking force is excellent. It's just that in the initial part of the brake travel, I think after you get past that little free play, the braking force builds a bit quickly. It does not make you feel like the brakes are too sharp, but from 0% to 5% or 10%, the buildup is still a bit too quick. You need to control your foot very delicately to make the initial part feel smoother. Do you understand what I mean? Otherwise, after the first stab at the pedal, for someone whose braking footwork isn't that refined, they might feel the braking force comes in a bit too much. But this is a very slight sensation. For most people, I don't think they will notice it. When this car is driven in the city in comfort mode, the first thing we should talk about is the suspension. This 4C air suspension is simply too comfortable and too soft. It can smooth out almost all the tiny bumps and vibrations in the road, including when the car goes over consecutive undulations or speed bumps. The first thing you notice is how clean and crisp it is. You can hear the suspension compressing over the speed bump, thump, thump, but there is absolutely no unnecessary aftermotion. Sitting in the car, your body also doesn't experience any extra bounce. Even during braking, in comfort mode, if I bring the car to a stop without intentionally lifting my foot at the end, the car only gives one slight nod, then settles back, and the suspension immediately supports it. But throughout the whole process, you can still feel softness. It doesn't stop sharply, dive, lift its nose back up, and then throw you back. Instead, the whole curve of the motion is like a wave. Do you understand? Extremely soft. In comfort mode, Volvo's 4C setup, in my opinion, is much better than the regular XC60's standard coil spring suspension in terms of comfort. In hybrid mode, as I also said earlier, the rear motor's horsepower and torque are not small, so in daily city driving, if you put it in pure electric mode, you will find that the power the car gives is still more than adequate. You never feel like there is any shortage of power. Overall, it drives very smoothly, and you never feel this car lacks strength. Whether in pure electric mode or in hybrid mode, the feeling is the same. And like right now, with nearly half the battery remaining and 27 kilometers of pure electric range left, in this state, the power delivery is still very eager. Even in hybrid mode, the engine is not especially eager to cut in. Overall, this car is still very willing to use the motor and battery to drive efficiently. And that is exactly the meaning of being a hybrid, isn't it? When you put this Volvo XC60 T8 into pure electric drive mode, put it in B gear, and turn off creep mode, the whole driving feel is almost no different from a full EV. In this mode, the car's power output becomes a little gentler, because in B gear, the level of regenerative braking is stronger, which is like adding a bit more damping to the accelerator pedal. It means the power doesn't come in quite so quickly. It's as if the whole character of the car has been slightly pulled back and softened. In this mode, for a beginner and for calm city driving, it feels especially approachable. Also, when using B mode to come to a complete stop in one-pedal driving, at the very end, I've already completely lifted off the pedal. And you can probably see in the footage that below the last 5 kilometers per hour, it very clearly has an automatic force pulling it back. It comes with a comfort braking function. At that final moment, the whole car stops especially steadily and comfortably. And the power it gives in EV mode is also completely sufficient. For example, right now, if I press the accelerator a little, the car pulls away very briskly. And as long as you don't push it past the kickdown point, it can be driven completely by the motor. Since we happen to be in pure electric mode, let's slow down a little and use D gear to see how this car accelerates in EV mode. Full throttle? And it's still okay, isn't it? For daily city driving, whether it's accelerating past traffic, squeezing into a gap, or simply being the first off the line at a traffic light, this level of power in EV mode is actually already very good. And when you don't use B gear, the coasting performance of the whole car is honestly excellent. In any driving mode, its coasting is outstanding. In that regard, in terms of driving balance, Volvo deserves praise. There is one thing about Volvo's steering that is quite good. No matter which Volvo it is, as long as it is built on the same platform, for example the SPA platform, from the S60 to the XC60 to the S90 to the XC90, in my opinion, the steering feel is completely consistent across all of them. That kind of consistency and cohesion is honestly done very well. If you blindfolded me and put me in a Volvo, I honestly find it difficult to tell which one it is, because the steering feel is exactly the same. It's a very soft and gentle steering feel, but overall, I do think the precision is a little behind some of the German competitors, especially when you are taking turns at relatively high speed. For example, when quickly taking a corner at an intersection, you may feel that the angle you turn the steering wheel and the direction the front end actually goes have a slight mismatch. To put it simply, you may turn the wheel 45 degrees, but only feel the nose respond by 35 or 40 degrees. You need to turn a bit more. And on Volvo cars, no matter which steering setting or which driving mode you are in, the increase in steering weight is all basically the same. To put it simply, I personally feel the feedback through the steering is just a little insufficient. But that assessment is only from the perspective of someone who really loves driving and likes aggressive driving. For normal family use, this steering is absolutely good enough. There's no major problem to pick at. And the straight line tracking is also very good. On rougher roads, even if you don't deliberately grip the wheel tightly, this car will not get pulled around by the road surface. There is no torque steer or steering tugging sensation at all. Also, in fast lane changes on ring roads, the front end is still very quick. But that also leads to one drawback. In comfort mode, this 4C air suspension has a noticeable front firm, rear soft sensation. When you make quick lane changes and weave through traffic, you can feel that the body roll at the rear is a little more pronounced. Although it never feels like the rear is stepping out, you still feel the rear follow-through is just a tiny bit slower compared with the standard coil spring Volvo setup. But for this T8, once you switch the drive mode into Sport, the chassis lowers, the damping increases, and it becomes firmer. In that mode, if you flick the steering quickly, the rear follow-through becomes excellent, even better than the standard coil spring setup. But again, that is from the perspective of talking about aggressive driving. Volvo gives you a Sport mode, so if you really want to push it, just put it in Sport mode and that's enough. In comfort mode, in terms of comfort, I personally can't fault it at all. At this level, it is a very, very good experience. Compared with the BBA rivals next door, Volvo's hybrid system is very smart. It knows when to bring in the engine and when to use electricity, and in any driving mode, the throttle response is excellent. The combined output of the motor and engine is, after all, over 450 horsepower, so in this respect, its power performance is very good. At a price in the mid-$40,000 range, compared with some other gasoline vehicles, especially BBA models, this throttle response is really very good. And right now, in hybrid mode, the engine still hasn't intervened. Let me give it some throttle so you can see. The power response is actually quite good, and I'm not even flooring it. I'm only pressing about 1/3 of the pedal. The steering, while quickly entering a ramp, is still quite stable. The front end still moves promptly. It's just that in comfort mode, the rear feels like it follows a little less, simply because it has been tuned a bit too soft in the rear. But in terms of comfort, especially for rear passengers going over speed bumps or large road undulations, the rear passengers can still remain very comfortable, with no jarring and no bouncing sensation. In terms of sound insulation and comfort, after driving it for several hundred kilometers over these past few days, I don't think there is much to complain about. Volvo's seats have always been ergonomic seats, and that has been one of the key things they have promoted for many years. This seat really is very comfortable. It fits my body especially well, particularly in the back and shoulder area. And as a top trim car, it also has thigh support, 4-way lumbar support, ventilation, heating, and massage, all of which further improve driving comfort. And in terms of softness, this seat gets it just right. It does not have any fake softness or fluffy hollowness. It just feels very comfortable and very supportive. As for noise insulation, this needs to be discussed from two sides. Because most of the time this car is driven in pure electric form, you become used to the cabin being quite quiet. Also, this generation of XC60 now has laminated double-glazed glass front and rear, so when driving on a ring road like this one with fairly new pavement, its tire noise and wind noise control are both very good. If you insist that I name which type of noise is most noticeable, it would probably be tire noise. After all, this is a large 20-inch wheel with a more performance-oriented Pirelli P0 tire. but I remember it has sound-deadening foam. So honestly, you would really have to be nitpicking to feel there is slightly too much tire noise. However, if we enter all-wheel drive mode, which means the engine is now forced to engage, I do feel that the sound of the engine entering the cabin is just a tiny bit more noticeable. Its exhaust note tuning is quite good, but with this Volvo engine, especially in low-temperature conditions, the noise that enters the cabin is a little more obvious. But once the car is actually moving and the engine has fully warmed up, it becomes very difficult for me to find faults. Overall, this car's sound insulation is still very okay. It's just that I feel around the rear right area, if there is traffic nearby, the noise there is just a tiny bit more noticeable, that's all. Other than that, this car feels really good on ring roads. The throttle response is excellent. If the engine is engaged, even with a little throttle, the car lifts its nose and surges forward. And the coasting is honestly excellent. There is no issue at all with the matching of the whole powertrain. Even without the transmission downshifting, the car already moves forward because the rear motor has enough force to make up for the slightly slow downshift speed of this ACEN 8TT. In comfort mode, even doing some quick weaving on the ring road is extremely smooth. This is a car you can drive at quite a brisk pace, and the overall matching of the dynamics is still very high. As a brand led by safety and environmental friendliness, Volvo has actually never been bad in terms of sportiness. Volvo used to have its own racing teams, and people who know Volvo's brand history know that too. And even now, overseas, Volvo still sells Polestar models based on this generation's T8 prototype. Longtime viewers know I previously bought a Polestar version of this generation's S60, and that car's sportiness was really beyond question. Big 6-piston Brembos, Öhlins manually adjustable dampers, strut brace, anti-roll bars, everything was done extremely well. Even now, in this more family-oriented Volvo XC60 with air suspension, its overall sportiness and driving communication is still okay. In terms of handling, the only real problem I can find is that the steering feedback is slightly lacking in information, although road feel is still okay. And then, in comfort mode, the rear suspension is just a tiny bit too soft. Personally, I think Volvo should add a personalized driving mode. Older Volvos used to have it, including the earlier versions of this generation. If Volvo added a custom drive mode, I could manually set the engine and transmission to a softer setting while keeping it in hybrid mode, at the same time increasing the suspension damping a bit. I think that would be perfect. This is really just a systems setting, so Volvo, I honestly suggest you consider it. But truly, this suspension in comfort mode is especially comfortable on rough roads. It smooths off all the sharp edges of the bumps, almost rounding them off. When the car passes over those imperfections, the whole sensation is like a wave. Beyond that, visibility in daily driving is very good. The forward view, the two large side mirrors on the left and right, which also have blind spot assist, and the center rear view mirror all provide very good visibility. It is almost completely unobstructed. Even though the two rear headrests are fixed, the view through the rear window is still very good, and the glass area is also very large. Overall, this car doesn't really have any obvious blind spots when driving. As for the voice control system, its overall response speed and recognition is still okay, but sometimes if you give it 2 or 3 commands, it doesn't execute them all, and only responds to the first one it heard. Anyway, voice control is something I personally don't use that much, but since you've made it, you should still try to make it as good as possible. Okay, enough talk. Let's directly put the car into sport mode and talk about the performance of this Volvo XC60. One full throttle kick and the power delivery feels very good, with almost no lag. The transmission shifts are extremely smooth, almost imperceptible, and there is absolutely no power interruption during shifts. A quick lane change to dodge someone who isn't watching the road, it stays very steady, extremely steady. In sport mode, when you quickly flick it over, the front end still changes direction very quickly. The response is still very fast, and body roll in this mode is clearly reduced. The seats hold you very tightly and very securely, and in this mode the rear axle clearly feels stiffer, so the rear follow-through immediately improves. The performance of this air suspension in sport mode is honestly, in my opinion, very good. And the way this powertrain delivers its power, even with half throttle, the car shoots out instantly. It's not even thrown forward, it just instantly goes. That sensation is excellent. In sport mode, the brake pedal feel is also especially good, especially solid. You feel the braking force is especially sufficient. The steering still feels as though the steering angle and the actual heading of the front end are not completely identical, but other than that, there is really nothing wrong with this car in terms of performance and sporty driving. And even when we quickly change direction within the lane, yes, the car has some body roll, but once you quickly straighten the steering again, the air suspension only gives one extra little motion and then immediately stabilizes the car. And the way the air suspension is tuned, like in comfort mode, is still on the softer side, without any sharp-edged harshness. So even if you put the suspension in sport mode and lower the chassis to its lowest position, it is still not irritating or uncomfortable in daily city driving. There is no jarring at all. The overall comfort remains excellent. It's just that in sport mode, it will always hold one lower gear than what would normally correspond to your speed. If it should be in 6th, it keeps it in 5th or 4th. That's why I say that if it could have a custom mode that lets you keep the powertrain in hybrid, increase the suspension firmness a little, and lower the chassis slightly, this car would be perfect for someone with my driving habits. Truly perfect. Volvo, I really hope you can consider whether a later OTA update can add that. Still in sport mode, flooring it through an intersection, the overall power response is still very good. The rear motor pushes first and then the transmission downshifts. Although the downshift is slightly slow, the shove is still very strong. The whole car lunges forward. This car does 0 to 100 kilometers in just over 4 seconds, and that is completely enough for daily use. That is why I say the Volvo XC60 T8 has an especially good dual character. And when you drive it normally, the throttle response is still very okay. It's just that this transmission is not very enthusiastic about holding a low gear and high revs. As soon as you lift off the throttle for about a second, it immediately upshifts again. However, Volvo still retains a manual mode. Once you pull the gear selector halfway back into B mode and then push it left or right, it enters manual mode. But in this manual mode, it forces a one-pedal style, or rather forces regenerative braking, which I think feels a little uncomfortable. This manual mode is more for use in certain specific road conditions, rather than truly for aggressive driving, especially since the paddle shifters have also been removed, right? Overall, this transmission's upshifts and downshifts in daily driving are almost imperceptible. It is still very smooth, and it always tends toward an economical strategy. When it can upshift, it upshifts. The response is okay, but when you have aggressive driving demands, the downshift is a little slow, and it is a little too eager to upshift. That's simply an issue with the base calibration. But really, how many Volvo buyers are going to be driving around aggressively weaving through traffic every day? And even if they do, in its current state, it is still very competent, because the base horsepower is large, and there is also a motor pushing from the rear. So taken as a whole, I think the overall driving experience still deserves a fairly high score. We've come to a red light here, and there is one small drawback. When you put it into reverse, as you can see, the reverse camera comes up. Once you put it back into drive, it switches to the 360-degree view, which is also very good. But if I then push it back into reverse again, it won't automatically switch back to the rear camera view for me. That is purely a small bug in the software design logic. Volvo, I hope this can be fixed later, because then it would be perfect. After all, the imaging quality of this 360-degree camera system is really very good, and using the 360 mode for positioning is genuinely useful. It's just that right now the front and rear cameras are a little dirty, but this vertical screen honestly looks very comfortable, and the image quality is really good. Don't let such a small bug ruin such a good underlying system. Okay, then after talking so much, my overall impression of this Volvo XC60 T8 is still very good. I still really like the driving feel that Volvo's entire T8 lineup gives me. In daily driving, it really is very good. For single-car families, for families with charging conditions, for consumers who want more versatility from one car without being too high-profile or too cookie-cutter, and also care about interior texture and quality, I think buying the Volvo XC60 T8 is extremely appropriate. Really. And for families with children, I think Volvo honestly especially good. I'm not saying this because of sponsorship or hype. I've personally bought Volvo products myself, and including these test drive vehicles, the interior odor is genuinely low. Not only is the odor minimal now in winter in a new car, but even after a scorching summer day at 40 degrees Celsius, sitting outside baking in the sun all day, the smell is still minimal. I'm not going to talk about Volvo's claims about its interior materials, plastics, chrome, and wood being this family-friendly or baby-safe material, because I'm not an expert in that. But purely from a subjective point of view, the smell really is low. Compared with some other new cars in the same class today, Volvo's performance in this regard really is better. Okay then, this episode is basically about time to say goodbye. What do you all think of the Volvo XC60 T8's performance? Anyway, I'll still say the same thing. For certain specific buyer groups, especially people who are very torn when buying a car, who want some electricity and some gasoline, who don't want to be high profile, who care about quality in all aspects, who like a simple minimalist interior style and want everything simplified and convenient, while still not wanting to lose that sense of premium quality, I think the Volvo XC60 T8 is a very, very good choice. Personally, after driving this car over the past few days, my overall experience indeed has been very good. Its sound insulation, quietness, rationality, and powertrain matching all feel very well-rounded. Alright then, thank you all for watching this episode of The Test Drive. See you next time. Bye-bye.